At precisely 9 a.m. PST on May 12, 2025, at the federal courthouse in Los Angeles, California, a palpable tension hung thick in courtroom 7B. Judge Eleanor Vance, her gaze like sharpened steel, swept across the faces before her. "Everyone," she commanded, her voice cutting through the heavy stillness, "brace yourselves." The trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs, the once unassailable hip-hop mogul, had reached its crescendo. Each breath in the room felt heavy, charged with the weight of years of allegations finally coming to a head. Miles away, in his familiar podcast studio in Austin, Texas, Joe Rogan sat before his microphone, his eyes gleaming with a focused intensity that bordered on fierce. His investigation into Diddy was a years-long obsession, a deep dive into the industry's murky depths, and he knew he was about to detonate a bombshell. He adjusted his headphones, the soft click echoing in the quiet studio, then nodded to his producer. "We've got it," he said, his voice low but resolute. "The recording everyone's been waiting for." Joe hit the button, and the audio filled the studio, then streamed instantaneously into millions of earbuds across America. It was an extraordinary recording, one Rogan had painstakingly described as the final private recording made by Prince Rogers Nelson. This wasn't merely an unreleased song. It held a brief, whispered conversation, ethereal and haunting. Prince's voice, barely above a murmur, spoke of trying to help a friend get out of a network of control. Diddy wasn't named explicitly, yet the chilling context and its timing, recorded in late 2015, just months before Prince's sudden death in April 2016, made it devastatingly poignant. Rogan had pursued this elusive tape relentlessly since early 2024, finally acquiring it through a secret source who risked everything. Back in the stark reality of the courtroom, Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson was poised, preparing for her next cross-examination. A subtle stir from her young assistant, Sarah, caught her attention. Sarah's face was pale, her hand trembling slightly as she clutched her phone. "What is it?" Johnson whispered, a flicker of concern. Sarah quickly held up the device, a breaking news headline blazing across the screen. "Joe Rogan plays Prince tape in Diddy trial." A slow, knowing smile, almost imperceptible, touched Johnson's lips as she glanced towards Diddy's defense table. "The prosecution will proceed," she announced, her voice, which had been steady moments before, now infused with a sudden surge of energy, an urgent, undeniable haste. The plan, she realized, had dramatically changed, and Diddy across the room was about to feel the full, unexpected force of Joe Rogan's relentless pursuit of truth. By 10:30 a.m. on that same day, May 12, 2025, in the Los Angeles Federal Courthouse, the atmosphere had grown even more taut. Diddy's lead counsel, David Schwartz, was gearing up for a crucial cross-examination. But Emily Johnson had a surprise. "Your Honor," Johnson declared, her voice echoing through the courtroom, "the prosecution has new evidence, just made public, which we believe is critically relevant to this case. We ask to present Exhibit P17 immediately." All eyes turned to Diddy. The usually confident, defiant mogul was nervously tapping his fingers on the table. When the name Exhibit P17 was mentioned, a flicker of alarm crossed his eyes. Schwartz, his lawyer, frowned. "Your Honor, we were not privy to this evidence. This is an ambush." "Your Honor, this evidence was just released to the public via an independent media outlet," Johnson countered, her gaze fixed on Diddy. This recording, described as the final private recording made by Prince Rogers Nelson, was publicly released by Joe Rogan on his podcast just hours ago. "We believe its content concerning a mysterious network of control Prince was trying to help a friend escape is directly relevant to the allegations of Mr. Combs maintaining a similar system." Rogan, on his podcast, had been meticulously dissecting every word, every phrase from the recording. He'd painstakingly tracked down untold stories, conducting interviews with ex-bodyguards, label executives, and insiders too terrified to go public. He'd spoken of the freak-offs, ritualistic parties where phones were confiscated, participants were blindfolded, and everything was meticulously recorded. He'd long spoken of Diddy keeping physical evidence videos and recordings on a private server in a bunker-like room at his Miami compound, a detail corroborated by the federal raids on March 26, 2024. When Johnson prepared the projector, Schwartz's head snapped up, his face paling as those words echoed through the courtroom. He knew who Joe Rogan was. He knew Rogan was a relentless digger. But Prince? That was a gut punch. A phone in the front row slipped from a young clerk's nerveless fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud, a small sound amplified in the tense silence. As Prince's audio filled the courtroom, his gentle yet ominous voice, a shiver ran through the room. Schwartz, usually unflappable, looked utterly stunned. Diddy, however, was a different story. His jaw, which had been tapping nervously moments before, now slacked, hanging open in disbelief. His eyes, usually shielded by an aura of impenetrable confidence, were wide, unfocused, reflecting not just shock, but a primal, dawning terror. A tremor ran through his hand as he instinctively reached to grip the table, his knuckles turning white. He stared at the screen, but his gaze seemed to penetrate beyond the image, as if he were staring into the abyss of his own unraveling. The entire courtroom held its breath, witnessing not just a legal maneuver, but a man watching his meticulously built world collapse. Schwartz lunged towards the judge. "Your Honor, we request an immediate recess. This is undisclosed surprise evidence. We need time to review." Judge Vance stared at Schwartz, then turned to Johnson, who stood with an unnervingly calm expression. After a tense moment of deliberation, she brought down her gavel. "Granted," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Court is recessed for 30 minutes. Counsel, prepare for chambers." Immediately, at 10:45 a.m. on that same day, May 12, 2025, chaos erupted outside the Los Angeles federal courthouse. News of the Prince recording being played on Joe Rogan's podcast had already ripped through social media and newsrooms. Reporters who had just been ushered out of the courtroom were in a frenzy, cell phones pressed to ears, laptop keyboards clattering. "It's a bombshell!" one reporter yelled into his phone. "Rogan's got a Prince tape. Prince is talking about Diddy." Even though Rogan hadn't directly named Diddy in the clip, the context of the trial automatically placed him at the center of the furor. On his podcast, Rogan was still in full analytical mode, connecting the dots. He spoke about what he called the ecosystem of silence Diddy had built, where NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, blackmail, and career threats kept victims and witnesses quiet. He remembered the interview with a Grammy-winning producer in February 2024, who had their career destroyed after refusing to delete footage from a Diddy party in late 2023. He also recounted the story of a former assistant who'd been forced to sign multiple draconian NDAs from early 2021 to early 2024, and was terrified to speak out. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a systematic pattern of control and abuse. And that's why this Prince tape matters so much, Rogan said on his podcast, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly tone. Prince was a man you couldn't buy. He was trying to expose something very, very dark. And it ties into the Rainy Day file, a master folder of encrypted backup footage, stored off-site, allegedly used as leverage against anyone threatening Diddy's empire. He recalled his anonymous source whispering about a very powerful politician appearing in those tapes, though Rogan always remained careful not to name names for legal reasons, understanding the depth of Diddy's alleged blackmail network. Back at the courthouse, Diddy, barred from communicating with his lawyers during the 30-minute recess, was seen sitting alone at the defense table, his face ashen. His eyes were blank, but Rogan believed he was seeing the walls of his empire crumbling before him. When the 30-minute recess concluded, at approximately 11:15 a.m. on that same day, May 12, 2025, at the federal courthouse in Los Angeles, everyone returned to the courtroom. While the official proceedings hadn't fully resumed, the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Diddy's lawyer, Schwartz, looked visibly tired, his brow furrowed. Emily Johnson, in stark contrast, appeared composed and more determined than ever. Though Rogan wasn't physically present in the courtroom, his podcast had become an undeniable integrated part of the proceedings. He had provided the public with the context for understanding the disturbing nature of the freak-offs and Diddy's alleged methodical accumulation of incriminating evidence. He'd exposed the allegations of powerful figures like Jay-Z and LeBron James being aware of these events, even if not directly involved, accusations that had sent tremors through the celebrity world and forced their respective legal teams to issue swift denials, highlighting the far-reaching scope of Diddy's alleged influence and the silence it imposed. Rogan knew that the fight was far from over. Even if the Prince tape didn't directly indict Diddy on every charge, it had created an irreversible tide of public opinion. His investigations had provided the backstory, the corroborating evidence, and the voice to victims like Cassie Ventura, whose own harrowing testimony, including the Intercontinental Hotel surveillance video from March 5, 2016, released by CNN in May 2024, had been a direct hit against Diddy. The graphic footage laid bare the physical violence she allegedly endured. The testimony of security guard Eddie Garcia on June 3, 2025, about Diddy's frantic attempt to buy the tape for $100,000 in a brown paper bag only further solidified the picture of Diddy's desperate attempts to cover up his crimes and manipulate evidence. By the afternoon of May 28, 2025, Rogan, still in his studio, wrapped up another special podcast episode. "This isn't about canceling Diddy," he said, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative register. "It's about finally holding someone accountable who built an empire on fear, exploitation, and silence." He looked into the microphone, feeling a deep but unsentimental satisfaction. His work wasn't finished. The trial was merely a battle won, not the war. The rainy day file still loomed, a sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of the powerful. Rogan knew he still had calls to make, interviews to conduct, secrets to unearth. The fight for true accountability would be long, messy, and fraught with danger. But now, he knew there was a shift. The echoes of the silenced victims were finally beginning to be heard, a direct result of his unrelenting pursuit of the truth. As the trial continued and more truths came to light, Joe Rogan knew the impact on Diddy would far eclipse any legal sentence. The empire had been built on the glitz of music and fashion, but now its very foundations were exposed as a structure of profound falsehoods and systemic abuse. The financial fallout would be an immediate and crushing blow. Diddy's once prestigious brands like Bad Boy Records and Sean John, once emblems of success and street cool, would face widespread boycotts and massive cancellations. Corporate partners, now acutely aware of the toxic association, would sever ties, with hundreds of millions of dollars in brand value estimated to evaporate within weeks. Lucrative endorsement deals would vanish, and investments in emerging companies would be hastily withdrawn. Rogan had heard financial analysts on prominent business news channels ever since late 2024, when the initial wave of allegations began to escalate, predict a staggering 80 to 90% drop in Diddy's net worth within a single year if a conviction were secured. But the larger, more insidious impact would be the utter annihilation of Diddy's legacy and public image. From a hip-hop icon, a self-made titan, and a supposed role model for ambitious young black men, he would be irrevocably transformed into a cautionary tale. The very songs that once ignited dance floors would now be viewed through a different, chilling lens, forever tainted by the accusations of forced drugging, sexual assault, and coercion. Rogan anticipated that broadcasters and streaming services would gradually, but inevitably, pull his music from mainstream playlists, and hip-hop historical documents would have to add a painful, indelible addendum detailing his precipitous fall, forever linking his name with allegations of depravity and entrenched criminal behavior. In terms of social and cultural influence, Rogan firmly believed this case would mark a critical turning point in the entertainment industry, akin to a seismic shift. It would serve as a chilling, undeniable reminder of precisely how power can be grotesquely abused and underscore the vital, urgent importance of believing victims who dare to speak out. It would fuel broader, more uncomfortable conversations about accountability within the entertainment industry, particularly concerning the insidious nature of NDAs and the covert mechanisms used to silence legitimate grievances. Rogan had witnessed these initial waves of discussion begin in late 2023, when the first lawsuits cautiously surfaced. But now, with the irrefutable weight of evidence presented in court, it would become an unstoppable avalanche, demanding systemic change. For Diddy himself, Rogan foresaw complete and absolute isolation. The fair-weather friends, the sycophants, the myriad individuals who had benefited from his lavishness and shared in his unbridled power would swiftly turn their backs. The whispers of the rainy day file and the powerful figures potentially implicated within it would haunt him, transforming him into a pariah in the very world he once so arrogantly commanded. No more lavish yacht parties in St. Bart's, no more multi-million-dollar deals, no more deferential nods from those in power. His alleged crimes, the forced drugging, the filming for blackmail, the physical assaults, the calculated exploitation, the systemic abuse of vulnerable individuals would become the indelible, defining narrative of his existence. As the trial reached its inexorable conclusion, Rogan knew that Diddy's name would never again signify triumph or untouchable power. Instead, it would echo as a stark, unforgettable reminder of an empire built not on talent or vision, but on fear, coercion, and illicit control. An empire that finally, inevitably, crumbled under the unbearable weight of the truth. And that, in Rogan's unyielding pursuit of justice, was exactly how it should be.